History or Fable by Thomas Francis O'Rahilly in Early Irish History and Mythology, published 2010. History or Fable. Section 2. Lebor Gaba. The history of pre-Christian Ireland as related in Lebor Gaba seems to have imposed itself easily on our ancestors. In the course of time, the increasing antiquity of the record only strengthened its authority, and as late as the 17th century, it was accepted unquestioningly as historical truth by scholars like the Four Masters, Keating, and Duld MacPhilibis. Despite its generally spurious character, Lebor Gaba embodies some popular traditions concerning the Godelic invasion and the names of the pre-Godelic inhabitants. One section of it, that relating to the Tuatha Dé Danann, owes its origin to a desire to reduce the deities of pagan Ireland to the level of mortal men. This part of Lebor Gaba misled Darboud de Jubanville into treating the whole work as a mythological compilation, a kind of Irish theogony, into which he read the struggles of the gods of life and light against the gods of death and night. Actually, Lebor Gaba is no more a mythological treatise than it is a historical one. While no one nowadays would accept all the fictions of Lebor Gaba, its influence on opinion is by no means exhausted. The biggest fiction of the authors of the Lebor Gaba, and a fiction which has necessitated a long series of other fabrications to support it, was their claim that the dominant Goidels had been in occupation of Ireland from a very remote period. And it is precisely this, quote, pious fraud, end quote, that has been most readily accepted by many scholars in recent times. Sir John Rhys, as is well known, maintained that the Goidels were settled not only in Ireland, but also in Britain from a remote antiquity. Indeed, Rhys's theorisings are quite as imaginative and unsubstantiated as anything in the Lebor Gaba. Even yet similar views are put forward from time to time by archaeologists who, chafing under the limitations of their science, too often succumb to the temptation to lend a specious semblance of reality to their speculations by linking them arbitrarily with the names of historical peoples. Even scholars who are rightly sceptical regarding the historicity of most of the kings who are recorded as having reigned in pagan times seem to lose their caution when dealing with the alleged kings of Ireland during the early centuries of our era. Despite the fact that the story of Tuath's birth and upbringings reads like a fairy tale, MacNeill gives it sufficient credence to infer from it that there was probably, quote, a plebeian revolution, end quote, in Ireland in the 1st century AD. The same scholar regards Maeve as an historical queen of Connacht who, quote, flourished just at the commencement of the Christian era, end quote. And because the pedigree represents Tuatha as sixth in descent from Jochu Fedlach, Maeve's father, he concludes that Tuatha flourished, quote, between AD 150 and AD 175, end quote. Likewise, he regards Cormac Ú Cuin as an historical king who conquered Tara from the Lagan. During Cormac's reign, he writes, quote, we trace the establishment in Ireland of permanent military forces, the Fianna, adopted no doubt in imitation of the Roman military organisation, end quote. This idea that the Fianna, the hunting and fighting bands of Finn and Gaul, were modelled on the Roman legions goes back to John Pinkerton, who wrote as far back as 1814, quote, his, i.e. Finn's, formation of a regular standing army trained to war in which all the Irish accounts agree seems to have been a rude imitation of the Roman legions in Britain, end quote. Now the Fianna in question are indissolubly linked with Finn and Gaul, and the only connection they have with Cormac is that Finn and his fellows are often supposed to have lived contemporaneously with Cormac. The question of their historicity is bound up with the historicity of Finn and Gaul. If these are mythical figures, so too are the Fianna, who have no existence apart from them.